Real quick before we start this video, the last video that I uploaded yesterday did not get as many views as I would like it to have. I think it's one of my best ones in a while. I got to talk about Christian Wood for 8 consecutive minutes, so if you have not watched that video, please go check it out. It'll be in the cards right above here. But today I wanted to talk about Zion Williamson and what his ceiling might be. I put a video out on him a little over a week ago about the topic of him potentially being a superstar already, but rather than talking about who Zion is right now, I wanted to focus on what he could be in a more broader sense down the line, rather than just where he is at the moment. Well, I think the best way to do this initially would be to just examine Zion's skill set as it stands right now, see how high that alone could take him, as well as consider some areas within that skill set where he could improve, as well as some areas that he's weak in that he could improve on to take him to another level. Obviously, there is Zion's athleticism and size. It makes him practically unstoppable going to the basket. He shoots 76% at the rim, which is very impressive for a player that the defense knows isn't much of an outside threat, if at all, and also the defense prepares for. Zion is already one of those players that is one of the top names at the top of the scouting report, so that they know how to prepare for him. Defenses are getting ready to prepare for Zion when they go to play the Pelicans now. They're making sure they put a big focus on protecting the basket, and even with that, he's still shooting 76%. His ball handling, I think, is a little underrated. It's very good for a power forward, and match that with his speed and his size, obviously, and the athleticism. It makes him pretty much unstoppable on the break with any kind of momentum. Doesn't even have to be on the break. This is the thing with his inability to shoot. If you give him too much space and the defender that's down low on him isn't that big, you might just be giving him enough space to get a bunch of momentum, and then it doesn't matter how well you contest, he's going to finish right through you. He is also very adept off ball, and that was really one of the most exciting things about him when I initially saw him. I'm going to hammer this into the ground as much as I have to because I think it's important. Off-ball movement is the most underrated aspect of a successful basketball team and a successful star player in the NBA, and Zion, despite his lack of a jump shot, has still been very talented off-ball and very aware off-ball, which I think is going to be a huge factor for how good he can really be. He's very good at cutting at the right time. He really just finds himself in the right place at the right time all the time. He sets good screens on and off ball, which can free him up. And of course, as the roll man, he is very good. And I think some playmaking, which we'll talk about in a minute, could make him very useful as a roll man. Rebounding wise, I think he can be great. However, with the current personnel on the New Orleans Pelicans, he isn't going to have any absurd rebounding numbers, and he is 6'6", so it's not unreasonable for him to not get anything more than like 12 rebounds a game. Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, and Derek Favors are all really great rebounders. Before Zion even joined this team, the Pelicans were a top 5 rebounding team. Drew Holiday is a pretty decent rebounder for a guard, and Josh Hart is an insane rebounder for a 6'4" guy. He averages 8.5 rebounds a game per 36, which is pretty damn nuts. An aspect of Zion's game that I feel is under talked about is his passing. He has great vision, he just isn't utilizing it all the time. I think given the right circumstances with the Pelicans coach, I believe it's Alvin Gentry, putting an emphasis on him to use his vision, I think under that circumstance he could average somewhere between 5 to like 8 assists, depending on how much he can be used as a lead ball handler. Because I think if he can turn his ball handling from a way to enhance his ability to steamroll to the basket, to him being able to legitimately dribble the ball for a majority of the possession and it's not a problem. If he could get to that level as a ball handler, I do think he could average like 8 assists per game, but realistically that's not happening. He'll probably be more like a 5 to 6 assist guy in his prime if the Pelicans put an emphasis on him doing that. Defensively, I think is where Zion could probably be at his most impressive, which is pretty damn crazy because he's already very impressive offensively with potential to be one of the most impressive offensive talents ever. His defense has not been amazing individually thus far when you watch him play defense. I've been watching a lot of Pelicans games because Zion is very fun. He doesn't seem as aware as you would like him to be. However, his advanced defensive metrics all look very good. I don't know what they're at now, but I know when I made that Zion video a few weeks ago, the Pelicans were in the 20s in defense when Zion is off of the court, and they were number 1 in defense with him on the court. So I definitely think that he has still been a positive. However, just from a visual standpoint, which I think is more important than the advanced metric, he has not looked that impressive defensively. However, I think if he can tune up some of that defensive IQ, seem a little bit more in tune to everything that's going on, as well as put an emphasis on effort, which he kind of already is doing, he can be, in my opinion, someone who can be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate down the line and potentially even win the award a time or two, because the combination of his size, his speed, his vertical give a good defensive IQ and the effort that he has already shown, and I think he can be a deadly defensive player who can pretty much guard all 5 positions. Zion, to me, at his peak, is probably similar offensively to Charles Barkley, a great dominant offensive threat despite him being undersized. But I think the main difference there being that Barkley was a lot more capable and a lot more creative in the post than Zion is. However, I think Zion is capable of being more physically dominant than Barkley, not only because he's bigger and I think probably stronger, but also the fact that he's playing in an era that is less big man dominated and power forwards don't really exist anymore. So Zion is going to be posting up against guys that are 220 pounds instead of Barkley, who would probably be more in the 250-pound range with guys that he's posting up. So he'll be able to physically dominate power forwards more than Barkley was able to dominate 1990s power forwards. However, even with not as polished of an offensive game or as polished of a defensive game, take Charles Barkley and then give him infinitely better defense, and I think you have an all-time great on your hands. Because Charles Barkley was a mediocre defensive player for his career, but an outstanding offensive talent and rebounding talent, which allowed him to win an MVP in, I believe it was 1993, pretty certain that's what year it was. Barkley plus great defensive player of the year level defense with some better playmaking, I think borders on the best talent ever, and in the right situation, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he can be one of the greatest players of all time one day. Now, of course, when you say that, I need to add the injury disclaimer that you always need with Zion. He definitely needs to lose between 30 to 40 pounds depending on what his actual playing weight is. Some people say 280, which is what it's listed as. There are some people saying it's even as high as 300 pounds because he gained some weight when he was rehabilitating. So he needs to lose weight for sure. I think he should definitely shoot to be around the 250 mark, as well as work on the way that he is walking and his landing. Gait is a very underrated aspect of why players tend to get injured. Gait is how you walk, and when you look at Zion and how he walks like he just did like 900-pound leg presses for an hour, like he just got finished with leg day. And that's far from ideal. That kind of walking pattern is bad for your knees and it leads to lots of injuries, especially when you are 280 to 300 pounds like Zion is, and especially when you're that weight consistently jumping 45 inches in the air and landing with all of that weight. But if injuries do not derail him and he lives up to his potential, I think he's going to be one of the greatest players ever. Now it's just a matter of if the circumstances are there for him to be able to get the proper accomplishments for him to really be in that GOAT conversation. I think Ingram and Lonzo Ball are some pretty decent supporting pieces. Lonzo Ball has not been given enough credit for how much better he has gotten this year, which ironically, he started to turn the tide as soon as B-Souls made a video on him, which I just find kind of funny. But I don't think Ingram ever reaches superstar potential. I don't know that Lonzo reaches anything higher than a off and on all-star level. So the Pelicans need to find a superstar level player to pair with Zion Williamson down the line. Or maybe there's a chance that he is like Giannis, and I think it's reasonable for him to win a championship with a player that's not really a superstar player, but like just a really good overall supporting cast. So that is possible. Also, can the Pelicans please rebrand? I don't want one of the greatest players ever to be known as a Pelican with those pretty mediocre jerseys and play in the Smoothie King arena. Please just rebrand. Zion does not deserve this. But yeah, that's what Zion's ceiling to me is. He easily has the highest ceiling from all these what is the ceiling of blank player video that I've been doing. I think the highest one previous to that was probably Ja Morant. But Zion, special player, could be one of the greatest to ever do it. Just needs the circumstances, the health, and he needs to live up to his potential. But that's the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.